So we'll start again. This is Lori Graymont with SJREI, and we're here with Greg Pinneo. He's with the Core Company, and he's actually going to be coming to SJREI this month in April. I guess it's this next month in April 5th and 7th. So you'll have an opportunity to hear him on the webinar and then attend on Thursday night, and hopefully you'll join us on Saturday, because you're going to find that the content he's going to share here is stuff that you cannot get anywhere else. Now, a little bit of background: he has been an investor for many years, he just told me 43 years. He started when he was 5. And he's learned a lot of things that go beyond your typical, go to a webinar, go to a seminar and learn. So these tactics are not just a toolbox of things that you can employ, but they're mindsets that are going to help move you forward faster. So let's go ahead and get started. I know, Greg, we talked about, if you were to name the top 10 things that have been the most important learning lessons in your career. Of course, we can't go through all of them right now. Let's just kind of dig in. What would be some of those? Let's go ahead and dig into that.
Lori, first of all, I'll be 60 years old by the time I see you in April. I'm not 60 yet, but I'm breathing down on it. So I have been at this. I started when I was 17. And amazingly, some of the things that happened early on that I was very fortunate, very naive to, some of those things that happened early on have become the basis of what I really believe in this business. Having, you start with what you know, you kind of do everything, and then you come back after a lot of years and you put it all together and go, what is timeless? What really makes sense over a long period of time? And so first, I think that to answer that question, you have to sort of analyze what are the goals and objectives. If somebody is trying to make cash in the next 6 months, well, that's a very focused objective. And there are tools in the toolbox that'll do that. But when I think of timeless principles that I believe in after more than 4 decades of doing this, I've got that list. And the very, very first thing on that list is understanding intimately the world of finance. Real estate is the clothing that finance wears. That was a quote by a guy named Tom Newman, who I was fortunate enough to know at a very early age. Chrysler's not in the business of cars, he used to say. It's not the paint, the steel, the rubber, the leather. That's not why Chrysler does what it does. The automobile is an excuse to be in the finance business. Well, real estate is the clothing that finance wears. And so when I look at a piece of real estate, I recognize that there's the dirt, the sticks, the bricks. That's one thing I'm looking at and evaluating. But I'm also evaluating a finance proposal that has a life and an ability all to its own. How do you buy the real estate, sell the real estate, but keep the finance? Right? They're two very separate entities. And I have to recognize in every negotiation, I have the ability as an entrepreneur to create and make money in both areas. I see so often people are focused on price. They find a piece of real estate they think is well valued. They pretty much lose their mind over here in the finance department. They pay 5 points, 12%. They do all kinds of crazy things over here, thinking that they're going to make money here. And at the end, they may make a little money on the real estate, but who gets all the money? The finance piece that got all the money.
That's right.
I want to create scenarios where I have the ability to serve people and win in both departments. But it takes real intimate understanding of finance to know how to create those scenarios and how to frame those proposals in a way that serves the seller that you're dealing with. So
That makes
finance, that's a big one. That's one. The second thing is that the objective of real estate is to create an opportunity to responsibly leverage. In the world of real estate, all I'm trying to do is to create a garage for new borrowed money to pull into. And I create that garage by creating leverageable equity. I create equities, I create cash flows. Those are the components that allow me to responsibly leverage that garage and pull new money into the garage that is borrowed, tax-free, which allows me to buy more real estate. And so understanding the bigger picture of not just what we're doing, but why are we doing it? And this directs you as to the type of projects you're looking for when you really know what you're trying to create. You're trying to create leverageable equity. And this is a kind of a much different understanding that a lot of people have about why they even get involved in real estate. I mean, that's the value of real estate, is the equity and the cash flow, which allows you to borrow to buy more real estate. Okay, so there's another concept. Let's just for fun, let's throw out one more that is more on the subjective side, more on the right brain side. It would be on the top 10 list. That surrounding yourself with extraordinary is just absolutely critical in every area of your life. Extraordinary people, extraordinary settings. In other words, controlling our environment, what comes in, what we're exposed to, what we're around, and controlling that, being extremely deliberate about what we expose ourselves to, so that that exposure adds to our life and benefits us. I think a lot of people don't even realize that the environment they put themselves in, the people they choose to deal with, they put themselves in a river swimming upstream every day, and they wonder why they're tired. They wonder why at the end of the day they're freaking exhausted. But it's like, well, look at where you're at. Look at the negative energy that you're surrounding yourself with, and it's like you're swimming upstream all day long and you don't even know it. So that environment, we get to choose our environment and the surrounding and the people and what we do and how we do it. Every last thing, I'm in my entire adult life, I have built every home I've lived in since I was 20 years old. And of course, I'm setting it in a stage of being able to look at what I want to look at, the floor plan, the style, the office, everything about it is what I want it to be. And when we control our environment, it allows us to have a mindset of possibility, which then, of course, opens the door to focused intention. There you go. There's three. How's that for, just a light start to our conversation, right?
There we go. So, it's interesting that you say controlling your environment, because this last weekend I just did a presentation for an investors group, and my topic was, why do entrepreneurs have a hard time saying no? It's like they like to change the deal. And one of the quotes that I found was that Warren Buffett says the difference between successful people and very successful people is very successful people say no to almost everything.
I'll come at that. I'll merge on that highway with a quote that I memorized when I was 18 years old, at a very, very thoughtful time in life, because of course the world is your oyster, right? And this one caught my attention, and it was written by a guy that was trying to figure it out. Have you ever wanted to just get in your car and drive, just to figure it out? Well, that's kind of what he did. And he wrote these words. He said, "I went to the woods because I wanted to live deliberately. I wanted to live deep, to suck out all the marrow of life, to put to rout all that was not life, not, when I die, discover I've not lived." And what you're talking about there is putting to rout everything that you should say no to.
That's right.
Which leaves those things that you're very deliberately choosing that have depth, meaning, purpose, that are absolutely in your crosshairs of purpose. I don't waste a minute, not 1 minute. I'm on task. Even if that task is relaxing, I know that that's what I'm here to do. And gosh, I look at a world, Lori, where, you know, the average American watches TV 4.5 hours a day. The average American checks their Facebook page 47 times a day. Are you joking me? Like, the people you deal with and I deal with don't do that. But I'm telling you, it's a wasteful environment. Being on purpose to what we're doing and knowing the difference between extraordinary and average, that's a big part of success, I believe.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Greg, I know that you're going to go through the top 10 list on Thursday, I believe it is, in the club. So let's leave the other 7 for that. I want to jump into a topic. You know, right now there's a lot of unrealistic sellers out in the marketplace. And we have bidding war after bidding war. Everybody thinks that's the only way that you can purchase properties in such a tight market is to outbid. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you have any tools that you can share with the group that's listening here today?
Sure. Let me first just sort of set the stage. Let's take, and I've counted this up to be exact, so I know it. Out of the last 200 properties that I've bought, 3 have been listed. So, and those were personal use properties that my wife said we just have to have that. So you don't argue with the boss, right? But going after listed properties, it automatically launches you into that arena in very, very difficult sellers markets like we're in, right? And so I have a different approach to real estate in general. First of all, I take the approach that everything is for sale. There's no laws against approaching someone about their real estate saying, I sincerely would like to talk to you about purchasing your real estate. And so let's start with that systems and augurs, that an augur, meaning it's a continual, ongoing, moving machine that is constantly probing the marketplace by location. I am an infill guy. I'm an investor. I'm not a speculator. And therefore, I go to what's known. I go to the best of areas. I go to the best of locations because they're known. They've got demand. Their days on market are 0. Their appreciation is the highest it could be. Their vacancy is the lowest it could be. I want to own what everybody wants. You could own about 9/10 of this country and nobody wants it, right? I mean, take a flight and you'll just look down and go, well, it's right here underneath me, right? Nobody, there's no demand here. And so principle 1 of what we hunt is we hunt demand real estate. But then in that place, it's how do you employ consistent systems that give you an opportunity to have a discussion with someone and have the first discussion with someone. I think the other thing that really gets in a lot of people's way is that we make assumptions about the currency that property owner speaks. Everybody makes the assumption that every property owner's currency is cash dollars, that they want cash. They want the top dollar and they want it in cash. And that is just a misnomer.
Mm-hmm.
People have all kinds of different currencies. Let me give you an example. There was a point in time when my wife and I were first together. I had built the house that we first lived in, but of course now we're together. Let's go find our house. Let's go do our thing. And so I told her, I said, I want you to go to the very, very best neighborhoods in Seattle that you like.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to drive by from the outside, and I want you to write down the address, let's just say, of about 200 houses that from the outside you think would be awesome. And so she went to the two most premium areas in all of Seattle, Queen Anne Hill and Magnolia Hill, and she wrote down about 200 addresses. Just from the outside, they were spectacular homes, all well over $1 million homes. And this is 20 some years ago, right?
Wow.
Okay. At the time, those two neighborhoods on the MLS had 43 homes listed over $1 million. So it was just about even, about 20 and 20, roughly, in these two hills in Seattle, Magnolia and Queen Anne. Okay, we got the list of her 200 that were not listed, and we wrote a very well thought out, very rhetorical, very well thought out letter.
Okay.
And we included a picture, and it was very professionally done on very beautiful letterhead, and it came in an envelope that looked like a college graduation. Right? So, I mean, heavy stock, beautiful stationery with a stamp, hand addressed calligraphy on the envelope. The key with that letter, what would you think the key emphasis of that letter would have to be when we're mailing this to people who own very, very expensive homes in these areas? What would be the one currency that these people would have in common? Well, I'll tell you what it was. Confidentiality.
Ah. Mm-hmm.
High net worth people don't want anybody to know what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, they really like flying under the radar. Putting a sign out in the front yard? No way. Well, so out of this letter, 200 letters, we had 50 appointments. Now that's a 25% response.
Wow.
Right? And we met with all 50 people, sat in their living room, had glasses of wine, champagne, coffee. I mean, it took time to meet with them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Got to know a lot of amazing people. Matter of fact, we're friends to some of them to this day that we didn't even buy their property. But what came out of that was, think about it. I know about more high-end homes that could be bought in Seattle. I personally have a confidential knowledge of more homes than the entire MLS system is exposed to. So doesn't it stand to reason that somewhere in there, I can carve out a deal quietly with somebody and make a better decision surely by the amount of choices I have?
Mm-hmm.
And we did. And we bought a home that was probably worth $1.15 million. We paid $9.25, but it was for a lot of reasons. They were more than willing to do that. We got some very creative terms on that, as well as $9.25. We lived there for 3 years. We sold it for $1.6 million.
Wow.
And but this is how I go about things. I wouldn't think of going about it any other way. And so if we're looking for investment property, we're very sophisticated about how to get that opportunity. If we're looking for single family homes, multiplexes, mixed use, raw land, I mean, once we know what we're looking for, we simply construct the systems to go find that very deliberately. And that's what I teach students. That's what I do myself. And so this gives you that opportunity. Now, once you have an opportunity, you have to show up with your toolbox, right? You got to show up knowing something, and you've got to show up with an ability to perform. but it gives you that opportunity, Lori. And I think that that's what everybody's looking for, is kind of that first opportunity.
So, Greg, are you going to share some templates of letters or some ways to think about and craft letters in the workshop on Saturday, or even some of the systems you talk about that people can, you know, sort of plug and play their needs in what you're sharing?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, some of these techniques sound almost old school in a very high-tech world that we live in, but therein lies the beauty. I don't know if you know the name Mike Cantu. He's in Los Angeles, right? And Mike has attended everything that I've ever taught. And but you look at Mike, he bought 57 homes last year in LA, right? None of them listed, all from very, very simple techniques. And yet this is the beauty of real estate. It's consistency, it's persistence. You know, anyone that thinks they can just sort of splash something out there once, we should just all go get a different job, because it's got to be consistent and dedication. So I ask the question right up front: how badly do you want this? Because like any kind of marketing, any kind of proposition that you're putting forth, it's got to be done very consistently over time so that people know that you're for real, right? Yeah, but we will absolutely cover that. And
awesome.
Yeah. So
just to recap, so one of the ways is to really understand who your seller is and that their currency may not be the highest price.
Right.
To not be buying on the MLS, but to get creative on how to reach them and have them raise their hand that they're interested and then show up.
It's being very direct, very direct. And of course, there's different ratios that you can expect. If we want to talk something as simple as single-family homes, Lori, right, we can divide that into two categories, and really the second into another two. One, owner-occupied, non-owner-occupied, right? Well, the non-owner-occupied now can be non-owner-occupied in-state owners, non-owner-occupied out-of-state owners. Every one of those audiences, they're a different audience, and therefore the communication has to be different. Who's your audience? Any negotiation starts with the primacy effect, the first thing people see in here, right? And you've got to be able to direct your communication to that audience effectively right out of the chute, because it's the first 7 to 10 seconds, whether it's reading, seeing, hearing, that people will remember. Right? So get your voicemail tuned up, because if it goes to a computer line and they give a phone number, it's just, you've lost it before you've even started, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is, you had indicated somewhere along the way that if you bought a house for 500 and you sell it for 500, you could still make 100 in between.
Yeah.
So share that a little bit.
Sure. Well, first of all, remember that there are two things that we're looking at. One, the dirts, the sticks, the bricks, that particular piece of real property. And over here, the finance package. Okay? Okay. So let's just use the easiest numbers we could possibly create. Okay? Let's take one $500,000 house, right, where most people would approach that in the marketplace. They would put anywhere from 10 to 30% down, and they would go get a conventional bank loan, and that's it, right? And that bank loan, the loan documents say exactly how the game's going to be played from here on out, don't they?
That's right.
They say that very clearly, right? And they have a due on sale clause. So that if you sell that property, that underlying balance, that promissory note, will be due and payable, right?
That's
okay. Right. But let's take a different structure. Let's take that $500,000 house and let's put a down payment. Let's just say $50,000. But now $450,000 If I were to structure that whereby the owner was the beneficiary of that note for $450,000, and let's say that $450,000 note was at 3% interest. Now you think, who in the world would lend you $450,000 at 3%? See, this is the brain kicking in. I'm very well aware of what people think because they go, who would possibly do that? Well, guess what? Ask that question to the billions of dollars that are in CDs, money markets, bond funds that are making far less than 3%. Mm-hmm. So why does that exist? If people wouldn't take that, why does that exist?
Right.
Because people do take that.
That's right.
And if it's a non-owner occupied property, they have serious incentive to be involved in an installment sale because they don't want to buy more real estate. They want to truly retire. They don't want to do a 1031, and therefore the installment sale does indefinitely defer their capital gain obligation. But let's just say I put a note at $450,000 and I pay them an interest-only payment, right? $11.25 a month. Am I right? Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah.
But now I take that home, I do minor changes, and I sell it for exactly what I paid, and I get $50,000 down. That recapitalizes my down payment, but I sell it on a note for 6% interest, let's just say.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my income stream as the beneficiary, right?
Yep.
$22.50 a month. I have an obligation for $11.25. The difference is $11.25. Do the math. I'm at about $13,000 a year. I keep that house for 20 years. There's my income stream. You see?
Yeah.
And this is just on one silly little house. When you're dealing in large multiplexes, the ability to make money on your money. I want you to think about every promissory note that you create is your startup capital for the bank of you. And you as a bank have a cost of funds at 3%. What if I lend it out at 5 points and 12%?
Yeah.
My cost of funds is no fee 3% for 20 years. Lori, I'm asking rhetorical questions, and I know how sharp you are, so have fun with me. But if I said, Lori, I've got $1 million I want to lend you at 3%, and you're going to well collateralize it, you would borrow it in about 3 seconds, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I'd be like climbing over everything to get to it.
Right, exactly. Because you know that, listen, now I'm gonna owe $1 million at an obligation, right? At 3%, but I'm going to take that $1 million and I'm going to, that's the bank of Lori now, that I'm going to put out there to the marketplace, and I'm going to become a lender.
Right.
And in part, I might lend on it. In other part, I might take that capital, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's expand on that for a minute. Let's say I buy a crappy house that I don't really want. I don't really want it, but I know I could sell it for what I paid for it. Let's say it, just on the outskirts, like a $400,000 not so great house, but I got amazing terms on this house. But with those terms, I have the ability to substitute the collateral for the note to a different piece of real property. So I have my hold property, my long-term hold property, and the garage there is big enough for a $400,000 note at 3%, right? $1,000 a month. It's got more than 1,000 of cash flow. It's got more than 400 of equity. So I take the collateral for the note from this crappy house and move it to a long-term hold property that has a garage big enough. Now I don't owe anything on that crappy house. And if I sell it even for what I paid for it in cash, now there's no mortgage to pay off, and I take that $400,000, which is a 10% down payment on my next $4 million building.
Mm-hmm.
This is the world of finance. The world of finance is, I used to teach a 90-hour course at the university on finance, and I always felt rushed. There's so much to know about finance and deal structuring. But this is why that's on the top 10 list of just being masters at understanding finance, because I may make very little on the real estate, but boy, do I make it on the finance.
Mm-hmm.
While serving people, while helping them defer capital gains, while helping them get an interest income on money they normally would have sent to the government.
Yeah.
Right? Amazing.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's really fabulous.
So those kinds of things are what we know. And this is, again, we're probably rounding first base with just these thoughts. When we get into larger transactions and fractionalized deeds of trust and syndications, and when we get into Regulation D offerings, oh my gosh, I've banged down every one of these doors. By the way, when you're the first guy in the door, sometimes you get shot. And I'm like the old timer in this. I've been the one saying, can we do this? Can we do that? And sometimes it's, when you're an innovator, when you're pushing it, it's not always a safe place. But what's the alternative? Living a boring life. I'd rather live the way I live, right?
Reaching your deathbed and wondering if you could have. That's the alternative.
Wow. You see, people tend to think I'm going to go the way of no risk. I'm going to play it safe. I'm going to play it safe because that's the smart thing. They think I'm mitigating risk by playing it safe. Mm-hmm. But when we don't go, we risk regret.
That's
right. And therefore, the real analysis is that there is no such thing as avoiding risk. We're either risking failure or we're risking regret. So the question is, what are we more afraid of? Failure or regret? And I got to tell you, I'm way more afraid of regret than I am failure. Absolutely. Failure can be the greatest teacher of all. You get up, you dust yourself off, and you go, shit, that didn't go so well. I'm going to have to adjust there.
Yes.
Regret, you drag around like a pallet board of bricks your entire life, and it just gets heavier and heavier and heavier.
Mm-hmm.
Failure, you can springboard out of that, and you learn, and wow, you go do it again, and now you've got it, right?
Yeah, better, exactly.
So I think that these are the philosophical questions that every entrepreneur has to ask is, am I cut out for that kind of thing? Mm-hmm. And it's fit me well for a lot of years. Not to say I don't have a few bumps and bruises, let me tell you.
It's the fact that you keep getting back up that counts.
I just couldn't sit anywhere on the sidelines. I've got to be on the arena floor. And I preach that. You've got to make that decision. And of course, if you're together, if you're in a relationship, if you're married, your spouse has to be on board with that decision as well. Because when you go out there into the unknown, putting your abilities and your competence and your drive against a lot of odds, well, it's not an easy road, but it's a very satisfying road. Yeah.
That's great. That's right. All right. So your number one investing tip is?
Learn finance in, out, left, and right, forwards, backwards. I'm shocked, Lori. I've probably spoken, well, even way back in the day. I've been to San Jose, but I was going to say I've probably spoken to every real estate investment group in this country, and so many real estate brokerages. It's not even funny. The John L. Scott's, the KWs, the Remaxes, and when you start talking finance to the real estate community, it's amazing how glazed over people get. It's just like it's a world they don't understand, and we have to know finance in, out, left, and right to be a successful entrepreneur in this business.
And so, where can they learn that?
Well, I hope to bring, I hope to put into this Saturday that we have coming up on the 7th. I truly hope that on that day, my objectives, I'll state it now and I'll state it again when I see you on the Thursday evening. The objective is that by the end of that Saturday, people's brain hurts.
Yes.
And it motivates them to dig in and learn more. I have one standalone block of education we call the Master Series. It's 100 hours. 100 hours. It's got 400 pages of corresponding workbooks. It goes along with 100 hours of audio CDs, of course, digitally downloaded, and DVDs. We're way too casual about this. You know, Lori, I'm a pilot, and if I had 60 hours under my belt and just, you know, barely a private rating, would you want to get in the plane and fly with me? No. You see, but when I have every rating the FAA offers, and I've got thousands of hours under my belt, I look at this as a metaphor that if we're going to do this thing, let's dive in and know it, in, out, left, and right. Take it seriously, and that's what I'm there to do. I'm gonna really try to cover a lot of ground on a lot of tools. A lot of tools that if you have a command of these tools, there's opportunities everywhere. Oh my gosh,
so
crazy.
Give some examples of the types of tools you're referring to.
Yeah, okay, let's talk about just sort of one, because it was a deal that was done this morning by one of my students. This particular tool, you remember how many homes were built between 2007, 8, and 9, that time frame. And they were all in the outskirts, right, of the major demand areas. They were these developments that just came out of the ground like everywhere, in every part of the country, right? And we know what happened between 2008 and 9 to now, right? This huge fall off of values, this hitting of a bottom in let's say 11, 12, and then a start back up, right? So we look at this like basically a decade later, and there's certain of these new first-time homebuyer homes that now are just coming into being worth what they paid for way back when. Now, this isn't in downtown San Jose, but 45, 50 minutes out, there's these developments, right? And they're everywhere. They're everywhere throughout the country. Well, what was happening at that time in 2007, 8, 9? There was a lot of 4.5% FHA money out there for first-time homebuyers. 30-year fixed mortgages. And we know what happens in the first 10 years of that amortization, very little principal reduction. And so there's still people now that are original owners that have very little equity, if any at all, in their homes, but there's 10 years off an amortization. Okay, fixed rate 30-year mortgage, 4.5%. Interesting. Could I rent that house for what their mortgage payment is?
Oh yeah.
Well, if I could, it's now starting to fit into a criteria. What about a letter that I might send to the entire population, the whole thousands of them who are still there as original owners? So they're original owners. I know the kind of mortgage they had. I know the amortization. I know that they've gotten 10 years bid off of it at this point. But they also know that there's no equity in the home, or very little right now. Couldn't I write them a letter to say, hey, I would love to chat with you about leasing your home. I'd like to structure my lease to where my lease payment to you would cover your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance payment. I would also love an opportunity at some point in the future to be the new owner of your home. If you'd like to transition out of your home and move to Nashville or Florida or wherever you may want to go, know that I am a permanent long-term tenant that is very interested in buying your home. If you'd like to chat about this, please give me a call. Phone rings, I check the statistics, and what am I there to try to do? 1, allow them to make a transition. 2, establish there is no equity in a home, but the tool that I might use is a lease with an option. But the option strike price follows the declining principal balance of their mortgage, because effectively I'm paying their mortgage.
That's right.
Well, the reason I bring up this example is, what does it cost me to get into that deal? I give them a first and last month's rent and a deposit. Of course, I sublease, collecting a first and last and a deposit. I have no capital, but now I've got a lease following a declining principal balance. I just closed on one of these myself about 3 months ago that I did 5 years ago. And I had a 5-year window in my option to buy. Well, in the last 5 years, that mortgage balance that started at 195 went down to 167. And in the last 5 years, the property doubled in value. So I just closed on it at 167. It's worth at least 400 right now.
Wow.
And what did it cost me out of my pocket? Nothing. I subleased it for the last 5 years.
Nice.
These kinds of tools, when we know the tool, we can be extremely proactive in targeting a likelihood where that tool can be applied. And there's one tool that will fit very well in the Wally World developments, and I have students doing these deals all over the country, right? And so, and think about it. Think about that plan in 5, 10, and 15 years. If you start with a $200,000 balance, in 15 years, you've got $140,000 equity. That's a 3% appreciation going this way, and an amortization starting at year 10 through year 25 going this way. 15 years, you got $140,000 on one silly little house.
Yeah.
One. And I tell people, I say, listen, isn't it conceivable that if you got focused, you could go out and do 10 of these this year? 10 of these done this year with no capital is a $1.5 million retirement plan 15 years from now. There's the numbers. It's how wealthy people think.
Yes.
They do what they've got to do today, they put it in motion, and then they just tend to the garden. And they look it up 15 years later and go, wow, amazing. That would be one of the 10 principles, by the way, not meaning to tell too many out of school. But if you flip, assign, get rid of everything that you ever do in real estate, you'll never create wealth. Holding demand real estate over time is a critical ingredient. And I get to tell you that because I'm an old guy. I'm about 190 years old when you factor the win. Okay.
All right, so Greg, I want to encourage the listening audience to go ahead and enter any questions that you might have for Greg. While you guys are putting your questions in the little queue box, I'm going to let you know that Greg is coming. He's going to be here on April 7th at 7 p.m. at SJREI.org. You can register there, SJREI.org. And we'll start the meeting around 7 o'clock on the 7th. In addition,
I think it's the 5th, isn't it, Lori?
Oh, I'm looking at the wrong date. You are 100% correct. That is the 5th. My apologies. The 5th is Thursday night at 7 p.m. And then we're going to do, basically we're calling it the art of negotiation. It's going to be, you're giving us some tools. You're going to open our minds to figure out how to put deals together better, how to see the deals based on the tools that we know. And that is going to be on Saturday. Again, you can register at sjrei.org. We do have that priced quite low compared to most of our normal meetings. I believe it's $97. If you register in advance, it'll be $197 at the door. So do register in advance. And that's an all-day class. Registration starts at 8:30. The class starts at 9 and goes all day. All right, so we've got some questions here. Let me see. So one of the questions is finding out about more of your trainings if they're not available to join you on the 7th. And so after Thursday night, what we can do is everybody that's attended the Thursday night and everybody that's attended the webinar will send out information regarding your additional trainings to the whole group. See if there's other questions here. Okay, one of the questions is this presentation being recorded? Yes, it's being recorded. Any CRM systems that you use to manage all of your leads and mailings?
Everybody has kind of their own way of doing it, and we manage our proactive questions of proposition. Let's put it that way. Through any means that we're asking a question, could we talk to you about buying your real estate? However we manage that question, it's all done by zones and areas. So a lot of people manage it, just by people in a database, but we have it managed by zones because the messaging that we send to different neighborhoods is distinctly different. I'll give you an example. There's an area in Ballard that Seattle, a neighborhood in Seattle named Ballard, but it's primarily made up of a Norwegian fishing community. And so think about the messaging that you would send that community versus Bellevue, which is young, edgy, hot, and hip, right? You can't send the same message to those two areas. Capitol Hill, made up of very eclectic, very granola, very liberal environment versus certain communities that we hunt, like downtown Edmonds. They call it Deadmans. It's everybody that lives there is over 65, right? Wow. And so your marketing has to be very, very different. And therefore, our incoming management of leads is all categorized by area, because when we get on the phone to follow up with those leads, and when we track any future dates that we're talking to them, you have to immediately go into the mindset of your audience. You have to go into the discussion of, in other words, connecting with that particular person, and demographically, at least, is a first step in that direction.
Yeah.
Okay, so awesome. Yeah, very important to manage every lead, though, for sure.
Is there a particular system that you do or don't use?
We have spreadsheets that we update literally daily with communication that we have, and so it's very customized. I know there's all kinds of CRM systems out there and software out there, but ours are very customized because, again, the note-taking is critical, and the language of that audience is the main piece of the equation.
Perfect. Greg, another question here. When you buy an installment sale, then switch the collateral, does that create a problem with the original sale that occurred?
Yeah. Well, again, as a part of your initial negotiation with that particular seller who becomes perhaps a note holder, as a part of that initial agreement, because that's when you have to have everything that you agree on has to be done right there before that deal is closed. And so as a part of that initial agreement, you would draft out maker's option may substitute the collateral for the note to a different piece of real property under the following two conditions. The substitute collateral as equity equal to or greater than the outstanding principal balance of the note at the time of substitution, and that the net positive cash flow on the substitute property is equal to or greater than the minimum committed payment on the note at the time of substitution. That is the classic substitution of collateral agreement. And you're going to explain it to them, and you're going to, of course, explain it to them given the benefits. If I cash out that note because I want to sell this property, it evokes a capital gains oftentimes in the part of the beneficiary, right? People don't want to become day traders that are selling their property on a note for a long period of time. They want to know that it's just consistent. I also want to show them that anytime I substitute the collateral, I'm wanting to show them that the collateral that I'm moving them to is an upgrade. It's got better equity and better cash flow, right? So again, adding benefit to that from my perspective. But you've got to negotiate all of that up front, Lori, in bold print. Yeah.
Yeah, and get them to initial so they can't say, I didn't know. So
Way more than that. I mean, I want acknowledgement. Most every deal I do that has these terms goes through a seller's attorney review, right? So, you know, you've got to know your stuff to be able to present it not only to the seller, but to their representation.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So real quick on that, just follow up. If you do that substitution, does it then create a trigger event for taxes or not?
It does not. No,
Okay.
no. You only trigger taxes if they are being cashed out of the note. Changing the collateral does not do that. No.
All right. One more question here, Greg, and then we're going to wrap up. This one is one that we were telling people we'd cover, so let's get to it. What would you do if you had to start over from now? Start from scratch.
Wow. You know, I get asked that question a lot. Okay. And like if after 40 years, if I was 18 years old again, knowing what I know now, what would I do? What would I do? Well, I really think I covered it in those first couple points. One, I would major in finance and I would avoid conventional lending institutions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In order to do that, though, I've got to really understand finance. So I would invest in my knowledge. Wow, would I? Number two, everything I would look at, I would be wanting to look at 95% of what I look at from a hold perspective. A hold perspective. That's the holy grail of real estate, is when you can hold what you buy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in order to hold it, you've got to structure the finance correctly. It's like buying a business. There's got to be more coming in than going out, right?
Yep.
Businesses don't survive when their obligations are greater than their income. So you've got to structure it properly. Those are the top two things that I would tell people that we just have to major in. And I've had to learn, you know, back when I started, there was literally one book. And fortunately, I had a couple amazing mentors. But now, quite honestly, I tell my students, I think they're spoiled, because I can hit a button and download hundreds of hours of street smart real estate.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
I do a tour that about every 4 or 5 years. There's one coming up this summer, Lori. I will love it if you would come. But I'll take students and drive by 100 buildings in one day that I've bought in Seattle. It's the most we can cover in one day, but we'll drive by 100. We get out of the van, we look at it, and I'll say, here was the thinking. Here was how the opportunity came up. Here is how the deal was structured. Here's what I did to it. There it is, right there. You're looking at it. Now let's go to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. God, if I had somebody that did that for me when I was 18, oh my gosh. I just can't even imagine how amazing that would be, right? But those are the two timeless principles: finance and hold. And that's where we'll major our training on that Saturdays. How do we create deals that are financed properly that we can hold? Okay.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Greg, thank you for your time today. You just hang here while I close out the meeting.
Yeah.
So I want to thank everybody for attending. Again, if you go out to sjrei.org, you'll see the registration page. He's here Thursday, April 5th, and then all day Saturday, April 7th. If you do want to come to the Saturday, make sure and register early, because we may not get a room big enough. And once it's closed, it's closed. So the earlier you register, the better we can plan to have the right size room. So don't wait. Go ahead and get registered right now. And the same thing for Saturday, or for Thursday, I mean. So, Greg, thank you. And we thank all the attendees. We'll see you on April 5th.
Thanks a lot, Lori. Appreciate it. Bye now.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.